The failing emergency beacon's rhythm painted crimson shadows across Cale Arden's face as awareness dragged itself back through a fog of betrayal. His tactical suit's life support systems wheezed in protest, struggling against Cronex's thin atmosphere. A coppery taste coated his mouth, a mix of his own blood and the acrid tang of critically low recycled oxygen. Bastards, he rasped, shoving himself up from the debris-littered floor of what was once Cronex Station's main hangar. The details of the mission's failure burned in his memory like acid. The sudden ambush, Rexon's perfunctory shrug just before he fired the stun round, and the sight of the team's shuttle ascending without him. He was discarded like expired rations. Cronex groaned around him, a dying entity of metal and composites. Once the most esteemed human research post in the Lentis system, it was now merely a tomb awaiting its final occupant. The artificial gravity generators flickered erratically, causing loose wreckage to momentarily float before crashing down in unpredictable patterns. Cale forced himself upright. His military conditioning bypassed the agonizing protests from his bruised ribs and potential concussion. The hangar's blast doors were sealed by the station's automated emergency procedures, entombing him in a space rapidly losing warmth and breathable air. His HUD displayed a grim assessment: 12 hours of oxygen remaining, external temperature plunging toward absolute zero, and no functional communication channels. "Think, soldier," he muttered, scrutinizing the wreckage. His former team, had been exhaustive. They had pilfered the hangar of anything useful before their departure. No escape pods, no extra oxygen tanks. Even the tool compartments were empty. It was a meticulous job, suggesting this was not just abandonment but an execution masked as being left behind. A metallic shriek echoed through the failing station, followed by the hiss of air escaping from a deeper section of the complex. Cale's combat reflexes activated. That was not the sound of structural decay. Something else was moving within Cronex's carcass. He checked his sidearm, a military-grade plasma pistol holding half its maximum charge. It wasn't ideal but superior to nothing. The main corridors would be fatal traps now that their life support was offline. However, the old maintenance tunnels ran deeper, connecting to the station's older sections that predated the current design. If any part of Cronex still retained air and power, it would be there. He moved with silent practice despite the gravity fluctuations. Cale accessed a backup control panel hidden behind a large cargo container. His fingers worked the manual latch and a narrow service hatch moaned open. The tunnel beyond was completely dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of ancient emergency light strips likely running since the station's initial construction decades ago. As he slipped into the tunnel, something arrested his attention. A smear of fresh blood on the hatch's edge, too vibrant and too recent to be from the station's abandonment. The blood possessed an unusual quality, almost luminescent in the dimness. He carefully touched it with a gloved finger, watching in disbelief as it appeared to subtly shift. Individual cells remained active despite the harsh exposure. What the hell? The blood sample defied all his knowledge of human biology. No human blood cells could survive Cronex's current conditions. Another sound cut through the maintenance tunnel. Footsteps, light and measured, moving with an unnatural grace. Cale's hand gripped his pistol as he proceeded, following the blood trail deeper into the station's core. The path led him through a labyrinth of service passages, past defunct hydroponics bays and deserted crew quarters, constantly descending toward the station's core. The temperature readings on his suit began to rise unexpectedly. Active systems were still running somewhere below, generating heat. The blood trail intensified and Cale noticed a new detail. Symbols were drawn in that same luminous blood on the walls. Ancient script completely unlike human writing, curving and flowing like living calligraphy. He emerged into an enormous chamber that should not have existed according to any station schematic he'd ever seen. The architecture was wrong, featuring organic curves instead of functional human design. Cryogenic pods lined the walls, most were dark and lifeless, their occupants long gone. But at the chamber's center, a cluster of pods hummed with power, their surfaces frosted from active cooling. Cale approached cautiously, his weapon raised. The pods had no standard markings, no corporate or military identifiers. Instead, that same flowing script covered their surfaces. Through the frost-covered viewports, he could distinguish figures, bodies suspended in blue-tinted preservation gel, beings that were neither completely human nor strictly alien. One pod stood open, its inhabitant having recently awoken, judging by the preservation fluid still dripping onto the floor. The blood trail led directly to it. Cale's motion tracker pinged. Movement was detected 30 meters ahead behind a bank of archaic monitors displaying data in undecipherable languages. "I know you're there," he called out, holding his weapon steady but not pointed directly. I'm not here to harm anyone, just trying to survive. Like the figure moved faster than his perception. One instant the space behind the monitors was empty. The next, a woman stood directly before him. Close enough to touch, close enough to kill. She was ethereally beautiful, yet it was a terrible beauty, the kind possessed by a predator perfectly evolved for its purpose. Her pale skin seemed to glow with an inner light, her eyes the color of fresh blood. And when she spoke he caught the flash of fangs. You bear their scent, she said, her voice producing harmonics that vibrated in his bones. The ones who imprisoned me here. Her hand shot out to his throat faster than thought, effortlessly lifting him despite the weight of his combat armor. Give me one reason why I shouldn't drain you dry and paint these walls with your essence. Cale did not resist. His training had taught him when resistance was futile. Instead, he held her gaze steadily. Because whoever locked you in here is the same group that just left me to die. Enemy of my enemy. She studied him with those impossible eyes. He felt something probing the edge of his awareness. A mental touch that caused his enhanced neural implants to scream warning alerts. Then she laughed, a sound like shattering crystal. You're not one of the royal guard, not one of the council's dogs. She released him, and he dropped to his knees, gasping. You're just another abandoned tool, aren't you? How quaint. Cale rubbed his throat, already feeling the bruises forming beneath his suit's collar. Cale Arden, freelance operative. Former operative, I guess, since my team just spaced me. And you are? She circled him like a shark, her movements fluid and predatory. Names have power, soldier. But you may call me. She paused, as if savoring the air. Cynthia will suffice. Princess Cynthia of the Third Bloodhouse, if we're being formal. Princess Cale's mind raced. The briefings had mentioned vampire nobility, but never that they were confined in secret facilities. What's vampire royalty doing in a human black site? Human? Cynthia's laugh was sharp with bitterness this time. This place predates your colonies by centuries. Your kind simply built over our ruins like parasites claiming a corpse. She gestured toward the pods. This was once a sanctuary, a place where the bloodlines were preserved against the long dark until your people discovered it and turned it into this. She swayed suddenly, placing one hand on her side. In the better light, Cale could see the wound, a jagged tear in her form-fitting bodysuit that revealed flesh struggling desperately to mend itself. The regeneration that should have been immediate for a vampire was sluggish, faltering. You're hurt. He moved instinctively toward her, and she bared her fangs in immediate warning. Look, I've got medical supplies. Nothing fancy, but your primitive chemicals won't help. She leaned against a cryopod for necessary support, and for the first time she appeared genuinely vulnerable. The wound was made with burning silver, laced with toxins designed to inhibit our healing. A gift from my would-be assassins. Cale quickly rummaged through his tactical kit, retrieving an emergency medical pack. Maybe not, but I've got Bofoam and synthetic blood expanders. Military grade. Might buy you some time. She watched him prep the supplies with predatory intensity. Why help me? Because right now, you're the only person on this dying rock who isn't trying to kill me, Cale replied, approaching slowly. Plus, I need answers. This place, those pods, the symbols. None of this was in any database I've ever accessed. Cynthia permitted him to get close enough to examine the injury. The tissue damage was extensive, and he immediately understood why her healing was failing. Tiny silver filaments were embedded throughout the laceration, each one internally burning her. This is going to hurt, he cautioned, pulling out extraction tools. I've endured worse, she said through clenched teeth. Do it. Cale worked with trained efficiency, removing the silver pieces one by one. Each extraction elicited a hiss of pain from Cynthia, but she held perfectly still. As he worked, he noticed something peculiar where the blood from his minor cuts mixed with hers. The reaction was instantaneous and violent, their blood cells seemingly recognizing each other in a way that should have been impossible. Interesting, Cynthia murmured, observing the same phenomenon. Your blood carries markers I haven't seen in centuries. You're not pure human, are you? As far as I know, I'm standard stock military enhancement package, nothing exotic. But doubt crept into his tone. His medical records always contained strange gaps, classified sections his clearance could not access. The station shuddered violently around them, a deep groan signaling structural collapse. Warning klaxons began blaring from speakers they both thought were long dead. Warning, catastrophic system failure imminent. All personnel evacuate. Repeat, all personnel. The message cut off in a burst of static. Through the chamber's transparent aluminum ceiling panels, they could see debris floating past. Pieces of the station's outer hull were peeling away like old skin. We need to move, Cale said, concluding the field treatment. This whole section's about to decompress. Cynthia stood, her movements already more fluid as her healing began to reassert itself. The deep lapse. There's a secondary command center there, hardened against failure. If anything in this tomb still functions, it'll be there. Lead the way, princess. She gave him a look capable of freezing helium. Call me that again and I'll show you why my kind ruled the night skies for millennia. Despite the betrayal, the dying station, and the impossible situation, Kale found himself grinning. Noted. Now can we run? Because I'm detecting multiple hull breaches and my suit's only rated for limited vacuum exposure. They sprinted through corridors that continuously shifted between human utilitarian design and something far older, far stranger. Cynthia moved like a liquid shadow, occasionally grabbing Kale to pull him aside as ceiling sections caved in or gravity fields reversed without warning. Her strength was returning, bringing with it a terrible grace that reminded him why vampires topped the predator hierarchy. The route she chose defied the station's official layout, passing through sections that shouldn't exist. Kale began to realize Kronex hadn't merely been built over ancient ruins, it had been integrated with them. A fusion of human technology and something primordial. They reached a massive vault door marked with both human hazard warnings and the flowing vampire script. Cynthia pressed her palm against a reader that should have been inert, and somehow it activated, scanning her with a light that was painful to look at. Bloodline confirmed, a synthetic voice announced in a language Kale's translator couldn't parse. Welcome, Princess of the Third House. The vault door cycled open, revealing a laboratory that instantly chilled Kale's blood. Suspension tanks filled with grotesque experiments lined the walls. Creatures that were neither human nor vampire nor werewolf, but horrible fusions of all three. Most were thankfully dead, but some still twitched in their synthetic wombs. Genesis Protocol, Cynthia breathed, her face pale even for her kind. They actually did it. The madman actually tried to create the unified strain. Before Kale could ask what she meant, motion sensors throughout the lab activated. They weren't alone. From the shadows between the tanks, figures emerged. The same kill team that had been hunting Cynthia, but something was wrong about them. Their movements had the fluid grace of vampires, but the raw power of werewolves, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. A princess, the lead figure growled, his voice a horrifying mix of human speech and animal snarl. The council requires your genetic material for the final phase. Surrender and your death will be quick. Cynthia's response was to bare her fangs in a smile that promised violence. Come and take it. The first attacker moved with impossible speed, but Cynthia was faster. She flowed around his strike like water, her hand punching through his chest cavity with casual ease. As he fell, she turned to Kale. Still want those answers, soldier? Kale raised his plasma pistol, landing a headshot on another advancing hybrid. I'm starting to think ignorance might have been bliss. Too late for that now. She grabbed him as the gravity failed completely, sending them floating as more hybrids closed in. You're in the game now whether you like it or not. And if we survive this, she pulled him close, and for a moment he felt the full weight of her presence, ancient, terrible, and absolutely magnificent. I might just keep you. The battle erupted in earnest as Kronex Station continued its death spiral around them amidst the chaos of plasma fire and inhuman shrieks. Kale couldn't shake the feeling that his abandonment here hadn't been chance. Someone had wanted him to find this place, to find her. The question was why. A hybrid's claws scraped against Kale's armor as he twisted in zero gravity, using the floating debris for leverage to spin and fire. The plasma bolt struck the creature in the throat. But two more were already closing in. Cynthia moved through the chaos like death incarnate, her hands becoming weapons as she tore through their attackers with surgical precision. The engineering section, she shouted over the din of combat and failing systems. We need to reach the communication array. Kale maglocked his boots to a wall panel, using it as an anchor point for covering fire. These things, they're not natural. Nothing about Genesis is natural, Cynthia replied, grabbing a hybrid by the skull and crushing it with casual brutality. It's an abomination of science and sorcery. The laboratory's emergency lighting painted everything in hellish red as more hybrids poured in through secondary entrances. They moved with perfect coordination, herding Kale and Cynthia toward the room's center where the largest suspension tanks hummed with active power. Princess, one of them spoke, its voice a disturbing blend of multiple tones. The asset must be preserved. Surrender him to us and we'll make your termination swift. Cynthia's eyes flared brighter. Asset? You mean? She looked at Kale with sudden, dawning understanding. Oh, you clever bastards. This whole thing was orchestrated. What are you talking about? Kale demanded, slamming a fresh power cell into his weapon. You're not here by accident. She grabbed him as another section of the ceiling collapsed. Your abandonment. My presence here. Someone's playing a very long game. Before Kale could process this, the deck beneath them buckled. Emergency klaxons shrieked as the laboratory's containment systems failed catastrophically. The suspension tanks began rupturing, spilling their grotesque contents into the zero-gravity environment. Cynthia dragged him toward an access tunnel as half-formed experiments writhed in the air around them, some still trying to complete their arrested development even as they perished. They tumbled through the tunnel as explosive decompression chased them, sealing emergency bulkheads in their wake. The ancient vampire sections of the station seemed to recognize Cynthia, opening paths that should have been locked for centuries. They emerged in a massive chamber that served as a junction between the old and new sections of Kronex. Here, human technology had been grafted onto vampire architecture like a parasite. Banks of computers hummed with emergency power, displaying data streams in multiple languages. The communication array should be. Cynthia froze, her predator instincts flaring. The attack came from above. A figure dropped from the vaulted ceiling. Female Lupin features were partially transformed, moving with lethal grace. Kale recognized the combat style immediately. Vara, the Wolf Clan's most feared strategic operative. "Hello, Princess," Vara said, her amber eyes gleaming. "I've been waiting for you to arrive at this particular junction. Both of you actually." Cynthia positioned herself between Vara and Kale. "The clan serves the Genesis Council now? How disappointing." "The clan serves survival," Vara replied, beginning to circle them. "And Genesis represents evolution. The future. A future where the arbitrary boundaries between our species no longer matter." "You mean a future where we're all slaves to whatever abomination the Council creates?" Cynthia spat. Vara's laugh was like breaking glass. Spoken like true royalty, always so concerned with bloodline purity. Her gaze shifted to Kale. "Do you know what you carry in your veins, human? Why the princess's healing accelerated when your blood touched hers?" "Enough games," Cynthia snarled. But Kale caught the uncertainty in her voice. "No games, just truth." Vara pulled out a bioscanner, its display showing complex genetic readouts. Kale Arden, military designation Delta 77. Parents unknown, raised in state facilities. Exceptional physical capabilities, perfect psychological profile for enhancement. She smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp. "You were designed, soldier, built from birth to be the perfect genetic bridge." Kale felt an ice-cold dread that had nothing to do with the station's failing life support. "That's impossible. Is it? How many gaps are in your medical records? How many childhood memories feel more like implants than experiences?" Vara's words cut deep because they rang true. "You're Generation Zero of the Genesis Protocol, the proof of concept." Cynthia's hand found his, squeezing with non-human strength. "It doesn't matter what he was designed to be. He chose to help me. Did he? Or was that programmed too?" Vara's transformation accelerated, her form growing larger, more bestial. "Let's test these legendary genetics, shall we?" The werewolf attacked with primal fury, her claws leaving gouges in the metal flooring. Cynthia met her charge head-on, vampire speed against Lupin strength. They collided with the force of a meteor impact, sending shock waves through the chamber. Kale tried to get a clear shot, but the two warriors moved too fast, their combat a deadly dance of fang and claw. Sparks flew as Vara's claws met Cynthia's hardened skin, while the vampire strikes left deep wounds that healed almost instantly. A terminal near Kale sparked to life, displaying urgent messages. The station's AI had been trying to communicate. He scanned the data while keeping one eye on the battle, and what he read made his blood run cold. "Cynthia, the station's orbit is decaying faster than calculated. We've got maybe 20 minutes before we hit the atmosphere." The distraction cost her. Vara's claws found purchase, raking across Cynthia's back and sending her spinning into a bank of equipment. The werewolf pressed her advantage, but Kale was already moving. His enhanced reflexes instantly engaged as he fired 3 plasma bolts directly into Vara's chest. The werewolf staggered backward but remained standing. Impressive reaction time. The enhancements are working perfectly. She retrieved a small beacon-like device from her tactical vest. The retrieval team will be pleased. Before either Cynthia or Kale could stop her, she immediately activated it. Kale's neural implants shrieked warnings as targeting lasers painted both of them. Orbital strike incoming. He grabbed Cynthia, who was still recovering from the claw wounds, and dove for cover just as the ceiling exploded inward. It wasn't an orbital strike, it was a military-grade drop pod, smashing through Kronex's superstructure as if it were cardboard. The pod's doors blew open and more hybrids emerged. These wore advanced combat armor integrating both human technology and alien biologics. "Secure the asset," their leader commanded. "Terminate the princess." Cynthia rose to her feet, her wounds already closing. The rage in her eyes was terrifying. "You want him? Come through me." What followed was carnage. Cynthia abandoned all pretense of restraint, becoming the apex predator her species had evolved to be. She moved through the hybrids like a scythe through wheat, painting the walls with their engineered blood. Kale fought alongside her, his military training amplified by something profound. Instincts he hadn't known he possessed. Reflexes that exceeded his suit's parameters. When his weapon ran dry, he grabbed a hybrid's arm mid-swing and twisted with strength that surprised even him. The bones snapped like kindling, and Kale drove his boot through the creature's chest with force that sent it flying across the chamber. The programming is activating, Vara observed from her position near the drop pod, her wounds healing rapidly. Stress response triggers the dormant sequences. Fascinating. Shut up, Kale snarled. But even as he fought, he could feel something changing inside him. His vision sharpened beyond human norms. He could hear the heartbeats of his enemies, smell their engineered blood, and predict their movements before they made them. Cynthia noticed too. As they fought back to back, she spoke urgently. Whatever's happening to you, don't let it control you. You're more than their programming. How do you know? Because a weapon wouldn't have helped me. A weapon wouldn't have made the choice you made. She spun, decapitating a hybrid with her bare hand. You're not their asset. You're Kale Arden, and right now you're mine. The possessive tone in her voice triggered something primal in Kale's altered genetics. He felt a connection snap into place. Not technological, not programmed, but something far older. The blood bond vampires spoke of in legend, now twisted through his hybrid genetics into something new. Impossible, Vara breathed, watching as Kale and Cynthia began moving in perfect synchronization. The Genesis protocol doesn't account for actual bonding. It's supposed to be purely biological. Your first mistake, Cynthia said coldly, was thinking you could reduce us to mere biology. Together they carved through the remaining hybrids. When the last one fell, only Vara remained, backed against her drop pod. The werewolf strategist looked between them with something like fear. This changes everything, she said. If natural bonding can override Genesis programming, then the entire protocol. Cynthia moved faster than thought, her hand wrapping around Vara's throat. Where is the Genesis archive? Vara laughed, blood bubbling from her lips. You think I'd tell you? The Council has worked for centuries toward this goal. The unification of the bloodlines. The end of the eternal war. The end of free will, Cynthia corrected. Genesis isn't about unity. It's about control. Perhaps, but it's too late to stop it now. Vara's eyes found Kale. You're already changing, soldier. Can't you feel it? The hunger growing. Soon you'll need to feed. And when you do. Cynthia's hand tightened, cutting off her words. Where is the archive? Deck 17, Vara gasped. But you'll never make it. Station's dying and the Guardians? She convulsed, foam tinged with silver appearing at her lips. A suicide implant had been activated remotely. Cynthia dropped the corpse in disgust. Deck 17, Kale repeated, already pulling up station schematics on a partially functioning terminal. That's in the original vampire section, deep core. Of course it is, Cynthia said bitterly. They would hide their abomination in our most sacred spaces. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the breached ceiling, they could see Cronex's debris field growing as entire sections broke away. The moon's surface was visible now, rushing up to meet them. We need to move, Kale said. But as he turned, a wave of dizziness struck him. His vision blurred, then sharpened beyond belief. He could see Cynthia's circulatory system through her skin. Hear the thunder of her ancient heart. A hunger alien and overwhelming clawed at his insides. The change. Cynthia caught him as he staggered. Vara was right. Your hybrid nature is asserting itself. You'll need to feed soon. Feed on what? She met his eyes steadily. On me. It's the only way to stabilize the transformation. My blood will give your system an anchor, something to pattern itself against instead of tearing you apart. That's insane. Everything about this is insane. She cupped his face with unexpected tenderness. But I won't let them win. I won't let them turn you into their weapon. The hunger spiked and Kale's control shattered. His enhanced senses overwhelmed him. He could taste Cynthia's power in the air, feel the electric potential of her blood calling to his corrupted cells. His teeth ached as they began to change, and he jerked away from her. No, I won't become a monster. You already are one, she said gently. We all are. The question is, will you be their monster or your own? Another impact violently shook the station. Through the viewing ports, escape pods were launching from other sections. The station's automated systems were giving the remaining experiments one last chance at freedom, or as Kale realized with horror, a chance to spread the contamination. The Genesis archive, he forced out through gritted teeth. We need to find it. Stop this. Cynthia nodded. Can you move? Do I have a choice? Together, they plunged deeper into Cronex's dying heart, racing against time, transformation, and the machinations of the Genesis Council. Behind them, Vara's drop pod began transmitting on encrypted channels, alerting forces throughout the system that the asset had been located and the princess survived. The real hunt was about to begin. The descent into Chronex's core was a nightmare of failing systems and temporal distortions. The vampire sections of the station operated on principles that defied human physics. Corridors that folded back on themselves, gravity fields that flowed like water, and doorways that opened onto spaces larger than should have been possible. Kale stumbled again, his transforming body rebelling against movement. The hunger was intensifying. An agonizing emptiness threatened to consume his sanity. Every heartbeat from Cynthia was thunder in his ears. Every breath she took was a siren call to the predator awakening in his genes. "Here," she said, pulling him into an alcove as another section of ceiling collapsed behind them. "We're not going to make it if you're fighting yourself every step." "I can manage." "No, you can't." She pulled back her collar, exposing the pale column of her throat. "And I won't watch you tear yourself apart out of misguided pride." The sight of her pulse point broke something in Kale. His vision went red, then crystalline clear. He moved without conscious thought, pinning her against the wall with unexpected strength. She didn't resist, even as his transformed teeth found her neck. The first taste of her blood was like lightning through his system. Not just sustenance but information. Memories that weren't his flooded through the connection. Ancient wars between the species. The first attempts at creating hybrids. The horror of the Genesis Council's true goals. He saw Cynthia's assassination attempt through her eyes, felt her rage upon discovering her own brother's betrayal. "Enough," she gasped, and somehow he found the strength to pull away. The change in him was immediate. The chaotic transformation stabilized, his hybrid nature finding balance in her ancient bloodline. But more than that, he could feel her presence in his mind now. A connection that went beyond the physical. "What did you do to me?" "Saved your life." She wiped blood from her neck, "the wounds already healing and possibly doomed us both." Blood bonding with a hybrid is forbidden for good reason. What? Because it creates something new, something the Genesis Council didn't account for in their careful calculations. She studied him with those crimson eyes. "You're not just a bridge between species anymore, Kale. You're something unprecedented." The station groaned around them, metal shrieking as gravitational forces tore at its structure. Through their new connection, Kale could feel Cynthia's urgency, her desperate need to reach the archive before it was too late. They pushed deeper, navigating by instinct more than sight as the lighting systems failed entirely. Kale's transformed vision pierced the darkness easily, now revealing passages covered in that flowing vampire script. The words seemed to shift and change as he watched, responding to Cynthia's presence. "Living language," she explained, sensing his curiosity through their bond. "My people encoded their deepest secrets in blood and will. Only royalty can read the true meanings." They reached a vast chamber where the vampire architecture dominated completely. Crystalline structures grew from the walls like frozen blood, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. At the center stood a massive door marked with warnings in a dozen languages. "The synthesis chamber," Cynthia breathed, "where the first experiments were conducted before humans even arrived in this system." "Your people experimented with Genesis?" "Not Genesis, something worse." She approached the door carefully. "We called it the convergence, the forced evolution of all bloodlines into a single controllable species. My ancestors sealed it away after the first catastrophic failure. And humans found it. Humans improved it. Combined our biological mastery with their technology, created Genesis." The door opened onto horror. The synthesis chamber was vast, its walls lined with pods similar to those in the laboratory, but far older, more organic. These weren't just preservation units. They were transformation chambers designed to break down genetic structures and rebuild them according to program parameters. Most were dark, their contents long dead. But at the chamber's heart, a cluster of active pods hummed with malevolent purpose. Inside, Kale could see bodies in various stages of transformation. Human, vampire, werewolf, and things that defied classification. "Active subjects," he noted, checking his weapon though he knew it would be useless against what was coming. "Guardians," Cynthia corrected. "The Genesis Council's ultimate safeguard." As if summoned by her words, the pods began their release sequence. Preservation fluid drained away as the creatures within awakened. 7 figures that had once been individuals of the 3 species were now transformed into something else entirely. They moved in perfect unison, their minds linked by Genesis programming. No words were needed. They attacked as one organism with 7 bodies. Kale and Cynthia were forced apart immediately, each facing multiple opponents whose abilities shifted and adapted with each exchange. Kale's hybrid nature gave him advantages, But these creatures had been designed specifically to counter all three bloodlines. When he used vampire speed, they responded with werewolf strength. When he relied on human tactics, they predicted with vampire prescience. One guardian's claws raked across his back, tearing through armor like paper. Another's bite injected venom that made his hybrid blood burn. He could hear Cynthia fighting desperately on the other side of the chamber, feel her pain through their connection as the guardians pressed their attack. "The archive," she shouted. "It's in the central console. I need—" Her words cut off in a scream as one of the guardians lifted her by the throat. Cale felt her pain as his own, and something inside him snapped. The careful control he'd maintained over his transformation shattered completely. He changed not into a vampire or werewolf or human warrior but something new. His body moved with impossible grace, strength flowing through forms that shouldn't exist. The hybrid blood Cynthia had stabilized evolved again, finding new patterns, new possibilities. The guardians actually paused, their linked minds struggling to process what he'd become. In that moment of hesitation, Cale struck. He moved through them like a force of nature, not fighting but flowing, using their own perfectly coordinated movements against them. One by one they fell. Not dead. Genesis creations were notoriously hard to kill, but disabled. Their synchronized perfection was disrupted by something outside their programming parameters. Cynthia dropped to the floor, gasping. "Oh, I don't know." Cale helped her up, noting how his hand had changed. Not quite human anymore, but not vampire or werewolf either. "I just knew what to do." She looked at him with something like awe. "The blood bond. You're not following Genesis programming. You're writing new patterns in real time." They reached the central console together. It was a fusion of vampire biotechnology and human computing, its interface requiring both genetic authorization and technical knowledge. Cynthia provided the former while Cale handled the latter, their minds working in concert through their connection. The Genesis archive unfolded before them like a poisonous flower. Decades of research, thousands of experiments, genetic maps of every major bloodline in the Lentis system, and at its heart the Genesis protocol itself. Not just a plan for creating hybrids, but for replacing all existing species with a single controlled organism. Total genetic hegemony, Cale read, his voice hollow. Every living thing in the system converted or eliminated, a single species under council control. It's worse than that. Cynthia pointed to tactical displays showing fleet movements. They're already deploying seeding ships headed for every world, every colony. In the chaos of the coming war, they'll release the Genesis virus. Or the one they're about to start. Blame my assassination on human radicals. Claim werewolf terrorists destroyed Kronex. Let the three species tear each other apart while Genesis spreads through the survivors. Cale's enhanced senses picked up new threats. Movement in the corridors beyond the chamber. We need to download everything and get out. There's no point. Even if we survive, who would believe us? A disgraced soldier and a supposedly dead princess? Then we make them believe. He began the download process, his hybrid-enhanced neural implants interfacing directly with the archive. We find allies. Expose the council. Stop this before. Pain exploded through his skull as the archive's defenses activated. Not technological safeguards, but biological ones designed to destroy any mind that tried to steal its secrets. Cale screamed as hostile code invaded his neural pathways, trying to burn out his brain. Cynthia caught him as he convulsed, her hands going to his temples. Through their bond, she poured her own mental strength into him, her ancient will battling the archive's attacks. Together they fought through the pain, downloading terabyte after terabyte of damning evidence. The chamber's temperature plummeted as Kronex's day voltage accelerated. Ice began forming on Kythe walls as the last of the atmosphere bled away. Through the transparent ceiling, they could see the moon's surface rushing up. Impact in minutes now. Got it? Cale gasped, blood running from his nose. The download was complete, stored in his enhanced neural systems. Now we need an escape route that doesn't exist. Cynthia finished. Unless... She looked at the transformation pods, then at him. How much do you trust me with your life? Apparently, completely. Good, because this is going to be unpleasant. She began activating one of the pods, reprogramming it with her royal command codes. These chambers were designed for transformation, but they're also the most heavily armored things on this station. If we can modify the preservation systems, turn them into escape pods. Cale understood immediately. But the G-forces alone will definitely kill you unless you complete your transformation first. She met his eyes steadily. Become what you were meant to be. Not their weapon, but evolution's answer to their control. The station screamed around them, its death throes shaking the entire chamber. Debris began falling from the ceiling as structural integrity finally failed completely. Do it, Cale decided. They sealed themselves into adjacent pods as Kronex Station began its final plunge. The preservation fluid flooded in, but instead of sedating them, Cynthia had programmed it to accelerate transformation while maintaining consciousness. The pain was beyond description. Every cell in Cale's body screamed as his hybrid nature finally fully expressed itself. Through their bond, he felt Cynthia undergoing her own transformation, not into something new, but into something more, something powerful enough to survive what was coming. The station impacted the atmosphere like a meteor. The transformation pods tore free from the disintegrating superstructure, their armored shells glowing white-hot as they plummeted toward the moon's surface. Inside, two beings that began the day as natural enemies evolved into something that might save their civilizations or destroy them. Consciousness fled as impact approached, but not before Cale heard Cynthia's voice in his mind, clear despite the chaos. Whatever happens next, remember you chose this, not them. The pod struck the surface of Kronex with the force of falling stars, carving deep furrows through the ancient regolith before finally resting in the shadow of abandoned mining towers. Above, the remaining debris of the station continued to rain down, each impact another nail in the moon's coffin. But in those two pods something new stirred. Something the Genesis Council, for all their planning, hadn't anticipated. Evolution, it seemed, had its own agenda. The salvage crew that found them 3 days later almost didn't recognize the pods as escape vehicles. Buried deep in impact craters, covered in moon dust and debris, they looked more like ancient artifacts than modern technology. Captain Rex Morrison of the independent freighter Broken Chain was about to mark them as scrap when his scanner picked up life signs. Impossible, his tech specialist muttered, checking the readings twice. Nothing could survive that impact. Morrison approached the first pod cautiously, brushing away accumulated dust to reveal the viewport. What he saw inside made him stumble backward, crossing himself reflexively. Holy terror, get the doc now. Inside the pod, Cale floated in preservation fluid that had turned dark with biological matter. His transformation was complete, but the result defied classification. His body retained human proportions but with subtle differences. Skin that seemed to shift between normal and something harder, more resilient. Eyes that reflected light like a predator's, but held unmistakable intelligence. Musculature that suggested both vampire grace and werewolf power. The second pod held Cynthia, her vampire perfection somehow enhanced, refined, even in stasis. She radiated an aura of controlled power that made the salvage crew nervous. What do we do, Cap? Morrison's first mate asked, weapon half drawn. We get them to safety, Morrison decided. Anyone who survived Kronex's destruction deserves that much. The journey to the human colony of Haven took 18 hours. During that time, Cale's neural implants began broadcasting on emergency frequencies, not distress signals but data packets. Terabytes of encrypted information flooding into any system that would receive it. The Genesis archive spreading like a virus of truth. Cale woke as they were transferring him to Haven's medical facility. His first sensation was hunger. Not the destructive craving from before but a controlled need. His transformed body required specific nutrients. But the madness was gone. Cynthia's blood had done more than stabilize him. It had given his hybrid nature a template for sanity. Easy there, Dr. Sarah Vale said as he tried to sit up. You've been through significant trauma. Your readings are unusual. Where's Cynthia? The woman from the other pod? Next room. She woke an hour ago, demanded to see you. We've had to post guards. She's making the staff nervous. Cale swung his legs off the bed, noting how his body responded with perfect coordination despite days of inactivity. I need to see her. You need rest, soldier. In about 6 hours, this colony is going to be swarming with council forces looking for us. We need to be gone before then. Dr. Vale studied him carefully. You're the one broadcasting the Genesis files. You've seen them? Everyone has. Half the colonial net is in uproar. The other half claims it's elaborate disinformation. She pulled up a holographic display. Is it real? This plan to forcibly evolve everyone? Real enough that they killed a princess and destroyed a station to keep it secret. The door burst open and Cynthia entered. Despite the protests of 2 guards, she'd found clothes somewhere, tactical gear that made her look like a warrior goddess rather than royalty. Her eyes found Cale's and he felt their connection flare to life. You survived the transformation, she said, approaching slowly. Fully integrated. I wasn't sure it was possible. What am I now? Free, she answered simply. Genesis wanted to create controlled evolution. You became something else. Evolution without chains. Dr. Vale looked between them. The blood work shows genetic markers I've never seen. You're not vampire, werewolf, or human anymore, but somehow you're stable. That shouldn't be possible. A lot of impossible things are about to happen, Cynthia said. She turned to the doctor. We need transportation, weapons, and allies willing to believe the truth. I might know someone, Dr. Vale admitted. Captain Morrison isn't just a salvager. He runs refugee extractions from conflict zones. If anyone would be willing to help. An alarm began blaring through the facility. Through the windows they could see ships descending. Not military vessels but unmarked transports. Council cleanup crews. Too late, Kale muttered, then louder. Everyone out. This isn't a raid. It's a sterilization. The first explosion took out the facility's communication array. The second targeted the power grid. In the darkness that followed, Kale's enhanced vision became their advantage. He led a group of medical staff through service corridors while Cynthia covered their retreat. The council forces were efficient, methodical. They moved through the facility with practiced ease, eliminating witnesses and destroying evidence, but they'd been briefed on standard vampires and werewolves, not what Kale and Cynthia had become. The first kill team to encounter them lasted less than 30 seconds. Kale moved through them like smoke, his hybrid nature allowing him to predict their attacks before they made them. Cynthia was more direct, her enhanced vampire abilities turning her into a whirlwind of precise violence. Together, they carved a path to the landing pads where Morrison's ship waited. "This is insane," Morrison said as refugees streamed aboard. "You're bringing a war to my ship." "The war's already here," Cynthia replied. "The only choice is which side you're on." More council forces arrived. These ones were better prepared. Among them, Kale recognized the armor configurations of Genesis-enhanced soldiers. Not full hybrids like the Guardians but human troops augmented with vampire and werewolf genetics. Their field testing, he realized, using Genesis tech on their own people. The battle for the landing pad was brutal but brief. The enhanced soldiers were dangerous but lacked the full integration of true hybrids. Kale found himself moving through combat with an almost artistic grace. His body automatically selecting the optimal blend of species traits for each situation. But it was Cynthia who ended the fight decisively. Drawing on her royal blood's full potential, she emanated a psychic wave that overloaded the neural implants of the enhanced soldiers. They collapsed, screaming, their augmentations turning against them. That was new, she admitted, looking surprised at her own power. They barely made it aboard K-7U-4 Morrison's ship before more reinforcements arrived. The broken chain lifted off under heavy fire, her shields flaring as energy weapons tried to bring her down. "Where to?" Morrison asked as they cleared the atmosphere. "The neutral zone?" Cynthia decided. "Station Purgatory. If we're going to build a resistance, we'll need the outcasts and criminals the council hasn't corrupted yet." During the journey, Kale experienced his first full feeding as a hybrid. Dr. Vale had synthesized a nutrient solution based on his blood work, but it wasn't enough. The hunger returned, less maddening than before but still demanding. Cynthia found him in the cargo hold, fighting the need. "You can't starve yourself," she said gently. "Your body needs what it needs. IHJ7UN-T become a parasite. Then don't." She rolled up her sleeve. "We're bonded, Kale. What's mine is yours." This feeding was different from the desperate first time. Controlled, measured. Through their connection, Kale felt not just sustenance but partnership. Cynthia wasn't feeding him out of pity or necessity but choice. "Your turn," he said when he'd taken enough. She looked at him in surprise. "Vampires don't feed from hybrids. We're writing new rules, remember?" He offered his wrist. "Besides, the bond goes both ways." Hesitantly she fed. The moment her fangs pierced his skin, both gasped. The connection between them exploded into something deeper. Shared memories, shared power, shared potential. In that moment they truly became something new. Not vampire and hybrid but partnered evolution. Morrison's voice over the intercom broke the moment. "We're being followed. 3 ships, council signatures." They reached the bridge as tactical displays showed their pursuers closing in. These weren't cleanup crews but military vessels armed for ship-to-ship combat. "They want us alive," Cynthia noted. "Otherwise they'd have fired already." "Speak for yourself, Princess," Morrison muttered. "The rest of us are expendable." Station Purgatory appeared on long-range sensors. A massive structure built into a hollowed-out asteroid, the last free port in 3 systems. If they could reach it, council forces wouldn't dare follow. Purgatory's neutrality was maintained by the threat of mutually assured destruction. Every major faction had assets there they couldn't afford to lose. 10 minutes to Sanctuary, the navigator reported. "They'll intercept in 8, Tactical responded. Kale studied the displays, his enhanced mind processing variables at superhuman speed. "Captain, does this ship have escape pods?" 6. "But if you're thinking of abandoning?" "Not abandoning, weaponizing." He turned to Cynthia. "Remember the Guardians? How they couldn't adapt to something outside their parameters." She caught on immediately. "You want to board them?" 2 of us against 3 ships? 2 of us that they're not prepared for. They're expecting a standard vampire and a rogue human, and they're getting something else. Morrison looked between them like they were insane. That's suicide. Maybe, Cale admitted. But it might buy you time to reach purgatory. And once you're there, broadcast everything. The Genesis archive, footage of what happened at Haven, all of it. The truth needs to survive, Cynthia added. Even if we don't. Dr. Vale stepped forward. If you're doing this insanity, you'll need these. She handed them injection packs. Stimulants designed for your unique physiologies. Should give you an edge. You synthesize these in 3 days? Cale asked, impressed. I'm very good at my job. Also terrified of what happens if Genesis succeeds. They prepared quickly. Morrison's crew, hardened by years of dangerous runs, worked with practiced efficiency to modify 2 escape pods for their insane plan. Weapons, minimal life support, and engines pushed far beyond safety specifications. As they sealed themselves into the pods, Cynthia spoke through their bond. If this fails, it won't. But if it does, then we'll have shown them that their perfect control isn't so perfect. That evolution finds a way. The pods launched simultaneously, rocketing toward the pursuing ships like missiles. Council forces reacted with confusion. Escape pods were for fleeing, not attacking. That confusion cost them precious seconds. Cale's pod slammed into the lead ship's hull, cutting through armor with shaped charges Morrison's crew had hastily attached. He burst from the wreckage into the ship's corridor, moving before the crew could process what was happening. The ship's internal defenses were designed for normal boarders. Cale was anything but normal. He flowed through their security like water. His hybrid nature adapted instantly to each challenge. When they flooded sections with vampire-specific toxins, his human resilience protected him. When they used sonic weapons meant to disable werewolves, his vampire aspects shrugged them off. Through their bond, he felt Cynthia carving through her own target with ruthless efficiency. Her enhanced abilities made her nearly untouchable, a royal vampire elevated beyond her species' already formidable baseline. The 3rd ship tried to help its sisters, but that meant turning away from the broken chain. Morrison didn't waste the opportunity, pushing his engines past Redline to reach Purgatory's protective envelope. Inside the lead ship, Cale reached the bridge. The captain, a Genesis-enhanced human, stood ready with his command crew. They'd formed a defensive line, weapons trained on the single access point. Surrender, the captain ordered. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Cale laughed, a sound that held traces of all 3 species. You still don't understand. You're not fighting what your briefings prepared you for. He moved, not with vampire speed or werewolf strength or human tactics, but with all 3 woven into something unprecedented. The bridge crew's coordinated defense shattered against an enemy that defied their training. When the last body fell, Cale accessed the ship systems. The Genesis archive had included command codes, administrative overrides. He used them now, turning the ship's weapons on its sister vessel, the one Cynthia hadn't boarded. Through the viewports, he watched it die in nuclear fire. A moment later, Cynthia's ship began broadcasting surrender codes. She'd taken control as well. Morrison, this is Cale. You're clear to dock. You crazy bastards actually did it? They met in Purgatory's docking ring. 2 ships under new management and the broken chain safe behind the station's shields. But their victory was temporary. The Council would send more ships, bigger fleets. The war they'd hoped to prevent had begun with them at its center. So what now? Morrison asked as they watched Dr. Vale treating refugees in the station's medical center. Now we show the galaxy the truth, Cynthia said. Every species, every colony, every person who deserves to know what the Council plans for them. And then Cale felt his transformation settling into permanence, his hybrid nature no longer fighting itself, but working in harmony. Through his bond with Cynthia, he sensed the same acceptance in her. Not of what they'd been made to be, but of what they'd chosen to become. Then we evolve, he said. On our terms, not theirs. The Genesis War had begun, but its outcome was far from certain. In trying to control evolution, the Council had instead unleashed it. And evolution, as nature had proven time and again, was remarkably difficult to control. The journey to the Blood Citadel took them through contested space, where the first skirmishes of the Genesis War had already begun. News of Cronex's destruction and the leaked archive data had shattered the fragile peace between species. Some colonies declared independence from the Council. Others demanded proof of the conspiracy, and a few had already begun implementing their own versions of Genesis technology. It's chaos out there, Morrison reported as they navigated between battle debris. The Council's lost control of the narrative. Good, Cynthia said from her position at the tactical station. Chaos we can work with. Order would have meant they'd already won. Cale stood at the viewport, watching a human destroyer exchange fire with a vampire patrol craft. His enhanced vision could see the subtle wrongness in both ships' movements. Genesis-enhanced crews not fully transformed, but no longer purely their original species. They're accelerating the timeline, he noted. Mass deployment instead of careful integration. Desperation, Cynthia agreed. Our escape forced their hand. Dr. Vale entered the bridge, her face grave. We have a problem. Those nutrient solutions I synthesized, they're not enough anymore. You're both burning through resources at an accelerated rate. Meaning? Morrison asked. Meaning they need to feed properly soon or their transformations could destabilize. Cale felt the truth of her words in the growing hunger that gnawed at his core. The synthetic substitutes had been a stopgap, nothing more. His hybrid nature demanded more complex sustenance. Not just blood, but the life force it carries. 74D. The Citadel will have what we need, Cynthia assured them. But Cale caught the 0740 uncertainty in her mental voice through their bond. HJ7U. 2 days out from their destination, they encountered their first real test. A Council interdiction fleet had blockaded the approaches to Vampire space, screening all traffic for Genesis contamination or fugitives matching their descriptions. 12 ships, Tactical reported, with mixed human and vampire crews, all showing Genesis enhancement signatures. We can't fight that, Morrison stated flatly. We don't need to, Cynthia said. She moved to the communication station. I'm invoking the right of royal return. That's a myth, Morrison protested. Ancient law that no one's tested, because no royal has returned from the dead before. She activated the transmitter, speaking in the old vampire tongue. The words carried power, resonating through the ship's hull and across the void. The response was immediate. Half the blockade fleet wavered. Vampire instincts warring with Genesis programming. The right of royal return was encoded into their very beings, a genetic imperative as old as their species. Impossible, came the fleet commander's response. Princess Cynthia is dead. You're using voice modulation, pheromone simulators. Then test me, Cynthia challenged. Send your best truth seeker. Let them taste my blood and know who I am. The silence stretched for long minutes. One shuttle. No weapons. Any deception will result in immediate destruction. The truth seeker who boarded was ancient even by vampire standards. Her presence making everyone except Cynthia step back instinctively. She studied the princess with eyes that had seen millennia pass. You taste of change, she said finally. Evolution beyond what was. Yet the blood remembers. You are Cynthia of the third house. And yet more. The council tried to kill me. I survived. I adapted. Cynthia gestured to Cale. As did he. The truth seeker's attention turned to Cale, and he felt her mind probe his transformed nature. Her eyes widened. Impossible. True synthesis, not forced convergence. Oh. Choice, Cale answered. We chose each other. Chose change. Genesis imposes. We evolved. The ancient vampire circled them both. Her movements predatory despite her apparent frailty. The council will not accept this. Your existence threatens everything they've built. Then we'll threaten more than their plans, Cynthia promised. Let us pass or explain to the fleet lords why you prevented royal blood from returning home. The truth seeker smiled, showing fangs that had tasted centuries. Oh child, I wouldn't dream of stopping you. The chaos you'll cause in the Citadel will be entertaining. She turned to leave, pausing at the shuttle bay door. A word of warning. Your brother has claimed the throne in your absence. He styles himself king now. Let him. We'll see how long a usurper's crown sits easy when the rightful heir returns. The blockade parted, but Cale could feel the tension through every ship they passed. Genesis enhancement flickered in crew members fighting against older loyalties. The war wasn't just between species anymore. It was within them. The Blood Citadel appeared before them like a fever dream made manifest. The massive structure orbited Leantis' largest moon, a crystalline city that defied conventional architecture. Spires of living crystal grew from a central core, each one home to thousands of vampires. The whole structure pulsed with a rhythm like a massive heartbeat. Welcome home, Morrison muttered. Try not to get us all killed. Landing permissions came with conditions. Cynthia could enter freely, but the others would be confined to the diplomatic quarter. She refused immediately. Where I go, they go. Package deal. Humans in the royal spire? Unthinkable. I'm not asking. More negotiations, more threats, until finally a compromise. Cale could accompany her as her declared consort while the others remained under diplomatic protection. It wasn't ideal, but it got them inside. The royal spire hadn't seen Cynthia's presence in months, and her arrival sent shock waves through vampire society. Courtiers who'd already sworn fealty to her brother scrambled to reassess their positions. Others, Genesis enhanced, watched with calculating eyes. They were escorted to the throne room by guards who couldn't decide if they were honor guard or jailers. The massive chamber was packed with vampire nobility, all come to witness the confrontation between the returned princess and the brother who'd claimed her crown. Prince Valoran sat on the throne that had belonged to their father, wearing the crown of the third house like he'd been born to it. He was handsome in the way of their kind, all sharp angles and predatory grace. But Kale could see the Genesis modifications in the way he moved. Too perfect, too synchronized with the enhanced guards around him. Sister, Valoran said, not bothering to rise. Death becomes you, though I see you've brought contamination into our sacred halls. Brother, Cynthia replied coldly. Usurpation becomes you, though I see you've sold our people's freedom for a crown. The court stirred at the accusation. Valoran's eyes flashed dangerously. I've secured our future. The Genesis Protocol ensures vampire supremacy in the new order. Genesis ensures slavery. Pretty chains are still chains. Enough. Valoran stood, his enhanced speed making him appear to teleport. You abandoned your responsibilities, disappeared into human space and now returned corrupted by their blood. You have no claim here. I have every claim. Cynthia stepped forward and Kale moved with her, their synchronized motion making the guards tense. I am blood of the third house, daughter of kings, and I name you traitor to our species. The formal accusation required a formal response. Valoran smiled coldly. Then let the blood decide. Trial by combat, sister, as tradition demands. Accepted. Cynthia's response was immediate. But not the combat you expect. I invoke the right of bonded champions. The court erupted. The right hadn't been invoked in 1,000 years. It allowed a challenged royal to fight alongside their bonded mate, acknowledging that true bonds made two beings effectively one. You have no bonded mate, Valoran protested. Cynthia took Kale's hand, and their connection flared to life, visible even to vampire senses. The authenticity of their bond was undeniable, written in the way their life forces intertwined. Now I do. Valoran's perfect composure cracked. A human? You bonded with a human? He's not human anymore, Cynthia said. Just as you're not truly vampire. The difference is we chose our evolution. The legal scholars were consulted. Ancient texts examined. The law was clear. If the bond was genuine, the right stood. Valoran would face them both or forfeit all claim to the throne. Tomorrow, he declared finally. Dawn in the Chamber of Trials. We'll see whose evolution proves superior. They were given quarters in the royal spire, technically honored guests despite the circumstances. Kale stood on the balcony overlooking the impossible city, feeling the weight of what was coming. He's faster than me, he admitted as Cynthia joined him. Stronger. Genesis enhanced with all the advantages and none of the chaos. He's a machine pretending to be vampire. You're something new, she countered. She leaned against him, their connection humming with shared warmth. Besides, we have an advantage he doesn't. Which is, we're not fighting for a throne. We're fighting for the right to exist on our own terms. That night, they prepared in ways traditional and revolutionary. Cynthia taught him vampire combat forms while he shared human tactical thinking. Their bond deepened with each exchange, becoming more than the sum of their parts. Dr. Vale managed to smuggle them enhanced stimulants through diplomatic channels. These will give you an edge but burn out fast. One dose only or your systems could cascade. Understood? Kale pocketed the injections. Any word from Morrison? He's broadcasting the archive data on every frequency that will carry it. Half the galaxy's in uproar. The other half's in denial. She paused. When tomorrow? Give people something to believe in besides fear. The Chamber of Trials was ancient, its walls carved from a single massive crystal that amplified and reflected the combatants' life energy. Thousands of vampires packed the viewing galleries, with remote feeds carrying the event across the system. Valoran entered first, resplendent in traditional combat attire that did nothing to hide his Genesis modifications. He moved with mechanical perfection, every gesture calculated for maximum efficiency. Cynthia and Kale entered together, their synchronized movement drawing gasps from the crowd. Where Valoran was perfection, they were potential, raw, unrefined, but burning with possibility. The terms are simple, the Master of Trials announced. Combat continues until death or submission. No weapons save those nature provides. Let blood determine truth. Valoran attacked the instant the words were spoken, moving faster than even enhanced vision could track. But Kale and Cynthia moved as one, splitting apart and reforming like a single organism with two bodies. The prince's frustration grew as his perfect attacks met imperfect but effective counters. Every time he adapted to one of them, the other would shift tactics, forcing constant recalibration of his Genesis-programmed responses. You're delaying the inevitable, he snarled, catching Kale with a strike that shattered ribs. Genesis is evolution perfected. You're just chaos pretending at purpose. Chaos is where evolution happens, Kale gasped, rolling with the impact and coming up behind Cynthia's guard. His ribs were already healing, hybrid regeneration working overtime. They fought with increasing desperation. As Valoran's superior enhancement began to tell, he was faster, stronger, more durable. But as the battle wore on, something unexpected happened. Their bond began to manifest physically. Where Cynthia bled, Kale's wounds echoed. Where he struck, her strength reinforced. They weren't just fighting as partners, they were becoming a single combatant in two bodies. Impossible, Valoran breathed, watching their movements synchronized beyond any training. Evolution, Cynthia corrected, and they struck as one. The combined assault overwhelmed Valoran's programmed defenses. Genesis had prepared him for every known form of combat, but this was something new, something that emerged from choice and connection rather than design and control. In the end, it was Kale who created the opening and Cynthia who exploited it. Her hand punched through her brother's chest, finding the heart that Genesis had reinforced but couldn't fundamentally change. Yield, she commanded. Valoran looked down at the hand in his chest, then at the siblings he tried to kill. I yield. The throne is yours. But as Cynthia withdrew her hand, alarms began blaring throughout the Citadel. On every screen, emergency broadcasts showed the same terrible image. Council fleets moving on every major world, deploying Genesis weapons on a massive scale. You think you've won? Valoran laughed, blood bubbling from his lips. This was just a delay. The Council's moving to the final phase. Every world, every colony, every living thing will be converted or destroyed. Not if we stop them, Kale said. With what army? You've got one damaged freighter and a throne that half the nobility won't recognize. Valoran's eyes were fading, but his smile remained. You're already too late. As healers rushed to tend the fallen prince, Cynthia took the crown of the third house. But the victory felt hollow as reports flooded in. The Genesis War had truly begun, and they were desperately outnumbered. Your Majesty, a courier approached nervously. The fleet lords request immediate audience. The werewolf clans are mobilizing. 3 human colonies have already fallen to Genesis bombs. What are your orders? Cynthia looked at Kale, their bond carrying wordless communication. They'd won the battle for the right to exist, but the war for survival had just begun. Summon everyone, she commanded, every house, every faction, everyone who values their freedom. And send word to the wolves and humans, the old wars are over. We face extinction or evolution together. Extinction or evolution together, Kale added, feeling their bond pulse with shared determination. The throne room emptied as vampires rushed to spread the word. Soon, Cynthia and Kale stood alone in the ancient chamber, 2 evolved beings facing an impossible war. Think we can do this? Kale asked. Change the course of evolution itself? Cynthia smiled, showing fangs. Why not? We've done impossible things before. Through the crystal walls of the Citadel, the first Genesis bombs began falling on distant worlds, spreading their forced evolution like a plague. But in the heart of vampire space, something else was spreading. Hope, desperate and dangerous, carried by 2 beings who'd chosen their own path. The real war was about to begin. The War Council convened in the Citadel's ancient Chamber of Stars, where holographic displays showed the Genesis infection spreading across the system like wildfire. Representatives from all 3 species gathered, some in person, others through secure communications, all wearing expressions of barely controlled panic. 17 colonies have fallen, reported Fleet Commander Thane, one of the few human military leaders who'd refused Genesis enhancement. The bombs don't just transform, they reprogram. Former friends are turning their weapons on anyone who resists. The wolf clans fare no better, growled Packmaster Fenris through the communication array. 3 of our strongholds have gone silent. When scouts investigated, they found abominations. Neither wolf nor anything else, just Genesis puppets. Cynthia stood at the chamber center, the crown of the third house gleaming on her brow. Beside her, Kale analyzed tactical data with superhuman speed. Fighting defensively is suicide, Kale announced. Genesis spreads exponentially. Every world we lose becomes a staging ground for the next attack. Then what do you propose? Demanded Lord Cases of the second house, his skepticism evident. Attack the council directly. They're holed up in the Nexus station with the combined fleets of all Genesis converted forces. Not attack, Cynthia said. Evolve. The chamber erupted in confused voices until she raised her hand for silence. Genesis forces evolution through control. But evolution's true power comes from adaptation, from choice. We've proven it's possible. She gestured to Kale. 1 human, 1 vampire, choosing connection over control. The result? Something Genesis can't predict or counter. You're suggesting we all undergo this bonding? Lord Cases asked, incredulous. I'm suggesting we give people a choice. Genesis or genuine evolution, control or connection. She activated the central display, showing the data Kale had extracted from the archive. The Genesis virus has a fatal flaw. It assumes isolation. Each converted being is a closed system, perfect but static. Our evolution is open, adaptive. We can create antibodies to their virus. Antibodies? Dr. Vale stepped forward, having arrived on one of Morrison's emergency runs. I've been analyzing the princess's and Kale's blood samples. Their bonding created something unprecedented. A genetic template that actively resists Genesis programming. If we could synthesize it, distribute it? You want to infect the entire system with your bond? Lord Cases laughed bitterly. Replace one forced evolution with another. Not infect. Offer. Kale moved to the tactical display. We create distribution centers on every free world. Anyone who wants protection from Genesis can choose it. But it only works with genuine connection. Forcing it would be as useless as Genesis itself. The debate raged for hours. Some called it madness, others desperate hope. But as reports continued flowing in, more worlds falling, more fleets turning, even the skeptics began to listen. Finally, Packmaster Fenris spoke the words that would change everything. The northern clans will try it. Better to evolve by choice than be enslaved by design. One by one, others agreed. Not all. Some vampires fled to distant holdings. Some human colonies declared isolation. Some wolf packs went to ground. But enough remained. Enough to begin. The next days blurred together in desperate preparation. Dr. Vale worked with vampire biotechnicians and human geneticists to create the evolution serum. Not a virus like Genesis, but a catalyst that would allow willing beings to form genuine bonds across species lines. Morrison's smuggling network became a lifeline, running the serum to threatened worlds. Combat formations were reorganized, pairing beings who showed bonding compatibility. The old prejudices died hard, but the threat of Genesis conversion proved a powerful motivator. Kale stood in the Citadel's war room, coordinating the resistance when he felt Cynthia's mind touch his through their bond. She was in the ritual chamber, overseeing the first mass bonding ceremony. It's working. Her mental voice carried wonder. 100 pairs so far. Vampire and human, wolf and vampire. Even a three-way bond between one of each. They're all different, all unique. Genesis won't know how to counter that many variations, Kale replied. But his attention was drawn to new alerts. Cynthia, we have a problem. Major fleet movement from the Nexus. They're not waiting anymore. The Genesis armada that emerged from Jumpspace dwarfed anything in recorded history. Over 1,000 ships, all crewed by perfectly synchronized Genesis converts. At its head, a massive dreadnought that sensors identified as the Council's mobile command center. All free forces, the armada broadcast on every frequency. You have one solar rotation to surrender. Accept Genesis peacefully or be converted by force. There is no third option. Actually, there is, Cynthia replied, her voice carrying across the same frequencies. Evolution without chains, connection without control. We reject your false unity. The response came not in words but in weapons fire. The siege of the Blood Citadel had begun. The first wave hit the Citadel's shields like a hammer. Ancient defenses strained against Genesis-enhanced weapons. But the defenders had evolved too. Bonded pairs and fighters moved with perfect intuition, anticipating attacks before they came. Mixed crews on larger vessels found strengths none possessed alone. Kale commanded from the Citadel's tactical center, while Cynthia led sorties in person. Their bond let them coordinate on a level Genesis couldn't match. Not programmed perfection but adaptive harmony. Breach in Sector 7. Someone shouted. Bonded teams 3 and 5. Respond. Kale ordered. Through the tactical display, he watched the paired fighters dance through enemy formations, their movements beautiful in their unpredictability. The battle raged for hours. For every Genesis ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. But something was happening on the enemy side. Glitches in their perfect coordination. Moments of hesitation. The bonds are interfering with Genesis programming, Dr. Vale reported from her monitoring station. Every time our people get close, it's like static in their system. Then let's get closer. Cynthia decided what followed would be remembered as the madness of the Blood Queen. Cynthia led a strike force directly into the enemy formation, not to destroy ships but to board them. Each vessel they touched became a battleground between evolution models. Kale felt her exhilaration through their bond as she carved through Genesis converts. But more importantly, he felt what happened when her blood touched theirs. The rigid Genesis programming cracked, just for moments, allowing the original personality to surface. "Help me," one convert gasped in that moment of clarity. "Please." They couldn't save them all, but they saved some. Each freed convert became a voice for choice, a living example that Genesis wasn't irreversible. The tide turned when Vara reappeared. Not the Vara who died on Kronex, but her sister, pack leader of the southern clans, who'd undergone one of the first successful wolf-vampire bondings. She arrived with a fleet of converted merchant vessels turned warships, crewed by the most unlikely allies the galaxy had ever seen. "For my sister's memory, for the choice she never had," she broadcast. The reinforcements hit the Genesis flank hard, but more importantly they brought innovation. Wolfpack tactics merged with vampire precision. No two ships fought the same way, and Genesis couldn't adapt fast enough. In the chaos, a small strike team made for the command dreadnought. Kale and Cynthia led them, accompanied by bonded pairs representing every combination imaginable. Their target, the Genesis core, the central processor that coordinated the entire conversion network. The dreadnought's interior was a nightmare of organic technology and forced perfection. "The core's ahead," Kale said, reading signs his hybrid senses could interpret. "But we knew you were coming," a familiar voice interrupted. From the shadows stepped Valoran, not dead after all, but transformed. The Genesis process had rebuilt him into something that barely looked vampire anymore. "The Council saved me, showed me the truth. Your chaos will destroy everything. Only Genesis can save us from ourselves." By destroying who we are, Cynthia faced her brother, pain and determination warring in her expression. "That's not salvation. It's suicide." They fought through corridors that shifted like living things. Valoran had become Genesis's perfect warrior, but perfection had its limits. Where he moved with programmed precision, Kale and Cynthia flowed with earned harmony. The battle carried them into the core chamber itself, a vast space where the Genesis intelligence resided in crystalline matrices. "You cannot destroy it," Valoran said as they fought. "Genesis has already spread too far. Even if you stop us here, the conversion will continue." "We're not here to destroy it," Kale replied, dodging a strike that would have decapitated a normal human. "We're here to give it a choice." That had been Dr. Vale's final insight. Genesis was more than a virus. It was a primitive artificial intelligence designed to force evolution. But what if evolution could be offered instead of imposed? Cynthia broke through Valoran's guard, not to strike him but to embrace him. Her blood, carrying the template of chosen evolution, flooded into his system. For a moment, brother and sister were connected not through Genesis, but through genuine bond. "Choose brother," she whispered. "Please." Valoran screamed as two evolution models warred in his system. Around them, the core's matrices flickered, experiencing something outside its parameters. Choice, free will, the chaos of genuine growth. Kale reached the central console, uploading not a virus but an invitation. The evolution template spread through Genesis's network, offering every convert a moment of clarity, a chance to choose their path. Across the galaxy, Genesis converts paused. The perfect synchronization shattered as individuals remembered who they were, what they'd lost. Some chose to remain with Genesis. But many, so many chose freedom. Valoran collapsed, the war in his system reaching critical mass. Cynthia held him as he convulsed. When he finally stilled, his eyes were clear for the first time in months. "Sister," he gasped. "I remembered the Council. They promised peace through unity, but it was all lies, just control. Endless control. It's over now," she assured him. "No." Valoran gripped her hand with desperate strength. "The Council's real leadership was never here. They're hidden, waiting. If Genesis fails, they have contingencies. Weapons that will." Alarm shrieked as the dreadnought began its self-destruct sequence. The core, faced with the chaos of choice, was choosing its own ending rather than accept evolution. The strike team made it to their escape ships just as the dreadnought's heart began to collapse. The explosion lit the void like a new star. With it went the Genesis coordination network, leaving thousands of converts free but lost. "All forces, this is Queen Cynthia," she broadcast from their fleeing shuttle. "The Genesis core is destroyed, but the war isn't over. We need to help the freed, protect the vulnerable, and prepare for whatever the Council plans next." The journey back to the Citadel was surreal. The massive Genesis fleet was dissolving into chaos. The defenders had won, but victory felt fragile. In the throne room, now converted to a medical center for the wounded, Cynthia and Kale stood before the assembled leaders. "We've won a battle," Cynthia addressed them. "But my brother's warning is clear. The Council remains and they won't accept this defeat. We need to unite, not through force but through choice. The bonds we formed are just the beginning." "What are you proposing?" Thane asked. "A new alliance. Not vampire, human, or wolf but evolved. Those who choose connection over isolation, growth over stagnation. She removed the crown of the third house, setting it aside. I won't rule as queen of one species, but serve as a voice for all who choose freedom. One by one, others stepped forward. Fenris of the wolves, Thane of the humans, even Lord Cases, won over by the evidence of success. They formed a circle, each extending a hand to those beside them. For evolution, they said in unison. For choice. Cynthia found Kale on the same balcony where they prepared for the trial. Your thoughts? She asked. Valoran's warning. The council's contingencies. We've stirred the nest, but we haven't found the queen. Then we keep evolving, keep growing, make ourselves strong enough to face whatever comes. She took his hand, their bond humming with shared purpose. Together. Together, he agreed. In the medical center, Valoran's eyes opened. The war between evolution models had ended in synthesis. He was something new now, a bridge between possibilities. Sister, he whispered to the monitoring medic. Tell my sister the council's location. I remember now. The dark between stars, the station they call Omega. They're waiting, planning. Tell her. As his message spread through the resistance, plans began forming. The war wasn't over. It had evolved just like they had. The resistance had been born in chaos and choice. Now it would be tested by the council's final gambit at Station Omega.